Hi everyone and welcome to the Colour Cave, where we like to play with art stuff. We are going to do a little bit of colouring today, and I wanted to honour some of the requests that you guys made for the birthday celebration video. So today, first of all, we are going to be colouring with these bad boys. I think it's about time that I showed you some colouring with some budget pencils, and not only that, we are going to be working in Johanna Basford's World of Flowers. So let's just go to top down view and we can get going. I've picked this page in World of Flowers. I think this is going to be really good generally for doing some tutorials and maybe some guinea pig work in terms of pencils. The pictures in these pages, because they're split up into all these little sections, they lend themselves much more to doing colouring videos. So we're going to focus on this one today and we shall see what we can do. I did plan to film this first thing this morning. It's now near lunchtime and I had to wait because the sun was streaming through the window and it was casting all sorts of funky shadows on my desktop here in the cave, so I've had to postpone it slightly for a few hours. So the first thing that I want to do, I'm just going to jump straight in. The first thing I want to do is the background, and I've chosen sort of sunrise or sunset colours here. So I have golden yellow, red orange and orange circuit, and those are the three I'm going to be working with. Now just before we get started, I will say that I learned to colour with Crayola pencils and I used them for a substantial amount of time, and I did have the 100 pack and I used every single one down to the very last millimetre. I did have that pack of pencils for a lot of years. Don't ever think that you can't create lovely colouring pages just because you've got Crayola pencils. You are not going to get the same results as you will get with artist grade pencils. There is no getting around that. Otherwise, why would anybody buy artist grade pencils? They would just buy budget pencils and it would be a false market. You can, however, get some really nice results. You're never going to get the lay down and the depth of colour that you get with Prismacolors, because Crayola pencils and Prismacolor pencils are literally chalk and cheese. The only things that they share in common is the fact that they are both coloured pencils and that they're both wax based, but that is where the similarities end. So I just want you to bear that in mind. You know, you can't achieve the same effect, but that does not mean that you cannot achieve a beautifully finished picture. So I'm going to start with my yellow, and the trick to using these pencils is to be really light-handed and build up plenty of layers without damaging the tooth of the paper. So this is going to be a sort of traditional sunset type look. So we're going to have the palest colour at the bottom. So I'm just going to work my way around these sort of itty bitty parts. And again, pay attention to where I am holding the pencil. I'm holding it quite far back. Push this up so you can see. And just getting that first layer of colour down on the paper. And most of you that have been hanging around for a while now will know that this is usually my first port of call when colouring anything, anywhere, ever. So we want to just get this down, and what I want to do is I want to go in kind of like a semicircular shape, and that's to sort of fit in where all the foliage is starting to hang down. So we're going to get a nice arc shape. So the closer I get to the middle of this, the higher up I'm going to take this yellow. Now it doesn't have to be a perfect arc. You know, well, it's up to you. If you want to make it perfect, then by all means painstakingly take the time to do that, but just roughly, and it'll give us a nice effect. Again, remember that this is a background. It really shouldn't be the focal point of your picture, and if it is, you're doing it wrong. Obviously there are times where it's intentional to do that, but for the purposes of this particular picture, we are looking at all the different things that are in the foreground, of which there's a considerable amount. So just get some loose colour down there. We're going to be going back over it a couple of times, so you don't have to worry too much about being too precise. Just get that base layer down. It's a really light pressure. One of the main differences between budget pencils like Crayolas And some of the more expensive brands, either the student grade or artist grade pencils, is the volume or ratio of pigment versus binder. Now, binder are basically just gelling agents that kind of hold everything together, and with the budget pencils like these, there is a much greater ratio of binder to pigment. And that's why with more expensive artist grade pencils, you will get a much richer colour laydown because there is just more colour in the core. That's the way that it works. And it's the pigment that makes the pencils expensive. So you can see why that would make perfect sense. Okay, so I'm going to switch over now to this orange circuit. I know this is very, very faint just now, but bear with me guys. We'll start to build this up and you'll see a bit more. So just above where I have the yellow, I'm going in with this orange. I'm not overlapping them yet. I'm just covering up that white space in the background. Make this all good. While I am doing this, Mr. Jem is away for the weekend. He is, well, it's half work, half pleasure. So I have the whole cave and the whole farm and the whole house to myself for the entire weekend, which is moderately exciting. So I'm just taking the time to kick back, make some videos. I usually have a stash of videos that are sort of scheduled and sitting, waiting to go live. And it's just in case something happens in the farm and for some reason I don't have time to, you know, to make and upload a video. So that stash has depleted and diminished quite considerably over the last few weeks because I've been super busy. So I thought I would just take the opportunity this weekend to get caught back up and have at least 1 or 2 videos sitting, waiting, ready to go, so that you guys don't get left without a video. Okay, I'm on to the red now. So I'm just using this at the very top part. Again, just above where we finished with the orange, and just really marking out roughly where I want things. When we get up in amongst the flowers at the top here, I'm just keeping things simple and I'm going to keep all the gaps red because we don't want it to get too complicated. There's plenty going on in this picture as it is without complicating things further. And quite often when I'm doing this, I'm actually just doing it to show myself where the colours are going. I'm sort of like mapping things out, and it can help you figure out stuff as well. And because it's just that first light layer, quite often if you're not happy with it, you can erase the majority of it, with the exception obviously you may be using a really dark pencil like a dark purple or something. You might struggle a little bit there, but generally it gives you the opportunity to change your mind and make decisions without actually harming your piece. Okie dokie, so what we want to do now that we've got these colours marked out is we want to start getting some depth of colour in there. I'm still using a light hand. I am not really pressing on the paper at all, but you can see there just that second layer. It pops out and it's so much more obvious on the camera, which is great because that demonstrates my point perfectly. But just that extra layer makes all the difference. Now we want to keep this reasonably smooth, so try not to vary your pressure too much. With these little flowers that are here, I think they look like the little fluffy dandelions you get, so I'm going to kind of avoid them for now and just work around about them. So as I'm nearing the orange, which I'm starting to do here, I am just letting up the pressure and just letting it fade out into nothing because we are going to try and blend those together. And I'm going to come back down here and just get that layer built up all the way along here. This is a really nice colour of yellow, I like it. The other thing I love about Crayolas is I love the creative names that they give their colours. It's fun, it makes me chuckle a little bit. My personal favourite is Fuzzy Wuzzy, which is a shade of sort of soft, kind of like blush pink. I'm not all that fond of the actual colour itself, ironically, but I like the name. Fuzzy Wuzzy is a good name for a pencil. I think there's another one as well, I can't remember if I think it's called Timber Wolf, and it's a sort of whitish grey colour. That's pretty cool too. Good names. I always think pencils are more fun when they've got fun names. I wouldn't normally pursue pencil backgrounds. It's not something I tend to do a lot of, especially not full pencil backgrounds like this. But because of the size of this image, it's perfectly doable. I think it's really, I just don't really have the patience for it. That's the honest truth. Because you have to be patient doing backgrounds in pencil anyway, but more specifically with Crayolas, because you're going to have to work that little bit harder to get some things blended together and, you know, getting it looking the way that you want it. So it is just a case of being patient. If you do not have any patience but you still like to colour in pencil, grab yourself some Prismacolors, because they are so soft and you can press down really hard and just have one layer of pencil and they still look fabulous. So I'm trying my best just to sort of manoeuvre this round here. Maybe put a little bit up around here. Come down here now. So there's not a huge amount happening in the cave today other than plenty of arting, but that's kind of what we do anyway, so no change there. I'm starting to work on a new watercolour painting which I will be filming, so I've been spending a bit of time on that, just trying out some techniques and colour combinations to make sure that it's going to work, because most of you know I am a novice when it comes to watercolour painting. I'm quite enjoying it. The only thing I don't like about it is the sort of rigmarole of getting everything set up and then having to wash brushes, and you know, it's a lot of stuff to organise, whereas I'm used to just picking up a sheet of paper and a graphite pencil and away I go. So there's that sort of aspect of it, and I'm quite lazy with stuff like that, and it's probably one of the only things that I'm lazy with, but it's just a lot of hassle. And if you don't have a lot of time, it's most of the time it's not really worthwhile starting something, because you don't have the opportunity to, you know, to sort of spend the length of time that it needs. If I had a little bit more space, you know, if I had a separate workspace where I could just leave my painting stuff out, I would most definitely do that, and I probably would do more watercolour painting, and in between layers while everything's drying I would go away and draw something, or just, you know, just do something else. But I don't have that luxury. Although the cave is a reasonable size, I don't have a lot of desk space, so I have to utilise what I've got. And give this a little sharpen. Oh, that's a pointy point, look at that, that's a good one. That is my, I was going to say ELO. I've got ELO on the brain just now because I've got my new sketchbook, which is called an ELO sketchbook. That is my Tagal sharpener. The debate rages on. I still see it all the time online, but I have had no issues with this black one, and it's over a month old now, so I'm happy that it's doing its job and that we're going to be okay with it. And I use it for most of my coloured pencils, so that's good too. I'm just trying to be careful around these flowers like I was talking about, so I'm kind of having to stop and pause and look to see where, you know, the edge of each shape needs to be. Again, I'm not overly concerned about it, but I'm just trying to keep it reasonably consistent. I'm trying to keep to circular motions as well when I'm colouring, but because we've got quite a lot of shapes to work around, it's not always the easiest thing to do, but that's okay. Let's bring this up in between here. So I'm starting to build the you know, the layer of colour up here now. I'm not expecting it to be completely smooth at this point. I probably have to go another layer before that starts to look less patchy, but we're off to a good start nonetheless. Okay, so now we're going to do a bit of work. I've deliberately not sharpened my orange, and that is because we want to start sort of smooshing these in together. So if I start over here, now I'm going to start short. My red starts roughly here, so I'm going to go from about here. And again, keeping that same light hand, I'm just going to work my way down into that yellow and lightening up the pressure as I start to head into the yellow. And we're just going to start to build this up now and get it looking spiffy. Bring this up around here. So I've given myself, I've almost got a band there now where there is hardly any pigment at all, and that is deliberate, and that's so that I can work between the red and the orange and get them to where I want them as well. As I say, this is all about sort of reworking areas and, you know, keeping that nice light hand so that you've got the ability to do that and you're not sort of stuck with your paper absolutely saturated to the point where, you know, the paper's not going to take any more pencil, because that's what we don't want. That's not helpful. Now you can see there, if you move quickly and go lightly, there's very little pigment coming off that at all, and we're using that to our advantage here for blending these colours together. That is one point where it is really, really good. But see, as I say, you just have to be patient and know that you're going to have to spend a bit of time on it and go back over it quite a lot. So I'll take that up to there. There is the temptation, particularly if you are a newer colourist, there is the temptation to just get in there and press down really hard, just out of sheer impatience or frustration, and that is the exact opposite of what you want to do. So try and resist that temptation, or if you're a person that is trying them out and you're used to using, say, you like Prismacolors because they're really soft, it kind of goes against your instinct because you want to try and get more pigment out the pencil, and I can tell you that it is not going to help you. Just patience, patience, patience all the way. This is also a really good way to teach yourself to loosen your grip on your pencil, and also to learn to let up on pressure and not press as firmly when you're colouring. This is a really good exercise for this, and I don't mean with Crayola pencils, I mean doing a gradient like this in a background. Even if it's something you just wanted to practice, you know, on a smaller scale, on a scrap piece of paper or at the back of a colouring book or something, that's it's a really good way to do it, because if you don't keep the pressure light, then you're going to really struggle to get that sort of softer line between the colours that you're using. Okay, so now I'm just kind of like joining everything up because I'm using the last colour now. This is us sort of making the pattern complete, if that makes sense. The shape of the colours where they are on the page. So again, I'm just being careful to go really, really lightly with this as well when I'm coming into this sort of transition area between the red and the orange. And after that, I would say like the hardest bit's actually done. I find this the most challenging part myself, personally, and I know it's different for everyone, but it's that sort of fear of, you know, getting the colours in the right places and making sure it's not wonky, or you've accidentally, you know, put too much pencil down in an area. I would say that's the more difficult part myself, but maybe that's just me. If you guys feel differently, I would love to hear from you in the comments about that. I have a bit of a thing about gradient backgrounds, you know, like looking like kind of sunsets and sunrises. It's something that I've been practicing a lot in watercolour, simply just to practice doing washes, and I've had some really, really nice effects, and I've tried some quite interesting colour combinations as well, so it's kind of my thing just now. I'm quite enjoying it, so that's obviously transferred over into everything else. Now see, there we go, I've actually pressed a little bit too hard at the top there, but because it's up at the top, that's okay, because we're going to be darkening that down anyway, and we're not actually mixing colours together at that point in the picture, so that'll be okay. I actually find doing this quite relaxing, because there's you know, it's quite sort of uniform in that you've got your three colours. Oh, and the mission is just to mix them together, so you can just sort of scribble away here. And the fact that you know that you've got to take your time, it kind of, I don't know, well, it relaxes me a little bit more, thinking, okay, well, there's no point in rushing because I've got all day to do this. Alright, that's looking pretty good now. I'm quite happy with that. So now we're going to go in, this is where we want to get the colour on the go. So I'm going to be jumping between the three pencils here, but I'm going to try and do it as methodically as possible. Now my temptation, I tend to like to work from dark to light rather than the other way round. So I'm going to start here with the red again, and I'm going to medium pressure now. I am not pressing particularly hard, but I'm putting more pressure on than I did before. And you can see the difference there just from that tiny little bit in the colours. So I'm just going to work my way down here. And as I get to this orange area, that's when I'm going to start to lighten up the pressure. And I'm going to overlap a tiny bit, and then I'm going to take the orange, and starting in the middle of the area, the orange area, so around here, I'm going to use the same type of pressure, and then I'm going to work up towards the red, and I'm letting up my pressure a little bit there, and I'm just letting it sort of glide into that and let them start blend together. So that's quite a nice gradient already. I'm quite happy with that. So that's the kind of pressure and technique that I'm going for all the way along here. That's the aim. Now don't be worried if you don't get it perfect every time, that's okay. Again, because it's a background, it's a sunset type thing, there's a lot going on in the foreground, you're still going to get that overall effect and you're still going to get the impact. It's only really you that's going to be criticising it because you know it's there. So try not to obsess over it too much and just keep working away at it, and the more you work away at it, the easier it gets over time. This one, if it's your first one, might not be perfect, but that's okay. I actually quite like having my older colourings and drawings, more so with my colourings rather than my drawings, because I'm still quite new to drawing, but it's actually nice to have the more imperfect pages, because you look back at it and you realise that all the hard work that you've been putting in, that you have actually learned something, and you can see that as a very physical manifestation of your improvement. And I find that really, really encouraging. If I feel like I'm moving forward with something and I'm improving, it makes me want to do it more. So I actually find it a really good motivator, and I know there's people that find it the opposite because all they can see is this big flaw. But you've got to try and turn it around and take the positives from the situation and applaud yourself that you know that you'll never make that mistake again, and your artwork's only going to get better. You know, it's not going to get worse. So I know I quite like having that sort of imperfection showing, because as I say, it's just a learning curve really. So I'm now just doing the same with the yellow as I did with the orange and the red. I just want to soften this out a little bit around here. Bring that into the orange. Now I just feel with this section here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see a wee bit more closely. I feel like the orange in this section is very, very pale compared to up here, so I'm just going back in it, and this is what I'm saying about going back and working over. Because I've used a light hand, I have the luxury of being able to lay down more pigment and the paper will take it. Just ensuring that I am heading into that yellow as well down the bottom. so that it all blends together. So that's turned out quite nice, and this is what I want the whole picture to look like. So what I'm going to do is I am going to speed up this next part of me doing this all the way along, and we'll catch up a bit further along. That is my background part finished, and I'm actually quite pleased with it. It's turned out quite well. And this is proof that if someone ever tells you you can't blend Crayola pencils, you can call them a liar. There are a few places that I would like to touch up, but I'm going to wait until I have coloured the flowers in just to see what the contrast's like and how much they're standing out, and that will determine how much more pencil I lay down in that background. But I'm really glad that I've got this done. I also wanted to make you aware of the time scales in this. That took me nearly half an hour just on the sped up part, not to mention the 20 odd minutes beforehand. So what I was saying to you about being patient and taking your time, I really mean it. If you want to do a background like this, especially with Crayola pencils, you're going to have to be patient and take your time. So it's very easy for us to just speed up these videos, and I do it myself when I'm watching other YouTube videos. You think, oh, I'm never going to be able to do that, and then you start to rush because you think that you should be doing it faster because the video was only a couple of minutes long. But you've got to remember all these videos are heavily edited, and also most of them are sped up as well. So sped up section, over half an hour just to do this one little bit. But that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. I have all the time in the world. Okay, so we'll catch the rest of the red parts, you know, the in-betweeny parts, once we get up to kind of like the top part of that page. The next thing I want to do is focus on these flowers down here. Now I'm going to keep them all the same colour, but I'm going to focus on where the light's coming from, and obviously it's coming from somewhere down in here. So I have picked 3 shades of purple, and I'm not going to lie, I picked one just for the name. You're going to love this. Purple Mountain's Majesty. Now that is quite an interesting name. Unfortunately, it's not that spectacular, but I'm stubborn, I'm going to make it work. I also have indigo and violet, which is purple and in brackets there. There's not much difference between the indigo and the violet purple, but I want a really subtle transition, which is why I have picked these particular colours. So I'm going to take my Purple Mountain's Majesty, and all I'm going to do is whack a layer of this down on all of our flowers here. This feels like quite a scratchy pencil. I haven't used this one before. I'm pretty sure it wasn't in my old set of Crayolas. In fact, I can almost guarantee it was probably just called something else, but it does feel like a really dry pencil, and it's this sort of thing that I feel that kind of lets these pencils down in terms of their consistency and their quality. But we shall see how we go. This one's going to be quite dark up here because it's all the way at the top, but we'll give it a little bit of a colour anyway, that'll be fine. So exactly the same as before, I'm not changing my technique at all, just a really light layer of colour going down on all of these. So when it comes to shading, we want to keep that sort of arch of colour. So this one in the middle is going to have quite a large paler section here, and it's going to be darker up around these sort of corners. And this one's the same, but the darker colour will come down further because it's further away from the light source. I hope that makes sense. So we're just going to work on these one at a time, and what I want to do is I want to start again with the darkest colour, which is the indigo, and again I'm just going to map out where the darker areas in each of these flowers is going to be to give you an idea of where we're going with this. So that's going to be somewhere around there. I give this one a bit more, make it come a bit further over. And that one's maybe going to be around there somewhere. So as I work into the middle, the dark part of each flower is going to transition from here over to here. This one's more or less right above the light source, assuming that we decide the light source is in the middle. So that's going to be dark up in there. When it comes to most coloured pencils, you will find that the blues are, or the blue hued pencils are slightly drier. I have noticed it with other pencil sets as well, and I think it's to do with what they use to, you know, whatever they derive the pigment from, it just must be not quite as agreeable, whereas things like reds tend to be a bit more sort of rich and maybe a bit more, there's a bit more moisture in the pigment. I don't actually know where they get their colours from. This one's only going to have a tiny little bit because that's really, really close, but it's going to have more on this side because light source is down here. The thing I always say about this, and I'm sure some of you will be absolutely sick to death of hearing this, but when you're doing things like light sources and shadows and whatnot, it doesn't have to be an exact science. What you're doing is art, so use your artistic license and, you know, don't agonise over it too much. As long as you've got the idea, people's brains will make up the rest. You know, they'll fill in the blanks, so don't worry too much. These ones are in behind, so I'm going to make that darker, just as if they're sort of tucked in. And again, I'm just putting a sort of a slightly heavier layer down, but nothing complicated. Okay, so now we've got a rough idea of where the darkest parts are. We're just going to start working away exactly the same as we did with the background, and we're going to make these look pretty. So I'll take this mid-tone now and just start working that in a little bit. Over here. And then we've got our lightest colour, which is our majestic, what's it called again? Purple Mountain's Majesty. Say that 3 times without stumbling your words. And I'm just going to work those in together. Going slightly over my mid-tone. Back to the mid-tone. And then the indigo. You can see what I'm saying about the colour difference. There isn't a lot in it, but it's enough to give that sort of subtle effect, which is quite nice. Now what I would also like to do here, and I wouldn't advise using black, but because I'm using Prismacolor, I wish I'm not using Prismacolor, Crayolas, I'm going to take the black pencil and I'm going to sharpen it to a really pointy point. All I'm going to do is run that pencil down this piece of the line art here. Oh no. So a bit of a disaster. I ended up having to put this in my desktop sharpener to get a point on it, and the one thing about these crank handle sharpeners is that they do chew up a lot of your pencil. Now that pencil was unused, and I would like to correct myself, it wasn't black, it's outer space, which is nearly black, but you can see how much of the pencil that I've had to get rid of to get some sort of point on it. So I'm hoping that this isn't going to break on me now, but this is as sharp as it's ever going to get. So yeah, as I was saying before I rudely interrupted myself with a dodgy pencil. And again, this is another thing about budget pencils as well. Although Crayolas are very hard pencils, that makes them more likely to shatter. So in a budget pencil, it's not uncommon for you to get breakages. So it's just something to be aware of. So there we go. I've just added in a wee shadow there, and I'm just going to add a tiny bit round that edge as well, just to make it blend in together a bit better. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go back and carry on. Now you can see that these purples, that's 3 layers of that purple, and it is really not that vibrant, and this is where the budget pencils really stand out from the student or artist grade pencils. So you have to accept that you will get to a point where there's just no more pigment going to go down on the paper, but you can still make a good job of it. So I'm going to do all of these in the same sort of idea. What I will do before I sort of speed through it is I'll do one of the ones in the middle, and I'll do this one over here because it's slightly different, and then I'll speed up the rest and we can carry on with the next part. So this one over here, because we've got these dark parts underneath, I'm just going to take this outer space colour again, aka the broken pencil, and I'm just going to tuck in a little bit of shadow. Now because the light's coming from this direction, the shadow's going to be on the right hand side, not the left, because the light's more likely to hit the left hand side. So your shadow's going to be on the opposite side because there's something in front of it. Once again, I hope that that makes sense. Hope I've explained myself properly. Sometimes I feel that I'm not, like, I know what I want to say and I know how I want to try and explain it, but I just don't seem to be able to put the words into a sensible order as they come out my mouth. So if there's anything that I've explained that doesn't make sense to you, please don't be frightened to ask in the comments or contact me via social media. I will not be offended, because I know sometimes I don't make the most sense. I had a kind of run of that when I was doing the fish picture in Kirby Rosanna's book. I was trying to explain about colouring the scales on the fish, and I spent about 20 minutes giving a roundabout explanation that I could probably have done more succinctly in about 10 minutes. But I just, yeah, my brain just didn't work that way. So here we are now, this is the mid-tone. I'll just pop a little bit around there. And down here. And then I'll take the indigo. I'm kind of frightened to sharpen any of these now, I really am. Even in the Tagal sharpener, which seems to deal with most pencils, when I'm sharpening them, it does sound sick. You know, it sounds as if there's something horribly wrong going on in there when it's grinding away. So this petal on the right hand side is going to be quite dark, because not only is it covered from the light source by this one here, but it's the furthest away, so that petal itself is going to be mostly dark. So I'm just going to keep going with the indigo. And then I'm going to take the outer space and I'm going to pop a line down here and just pull it out a little bit up in this corner and down the back as well, or down the left hand side, should I say, down the back, you know what I mean. So I'm really only leaving this pale spot here. The middle one's going to be a bit more sensible. It's going to kind of follow what we've been, you know, the rule that we've been following, if you like, a bit more closely. So indigo in at the back. Yeah, the violet purple here. Bring this down at a slight angle. And then we can go back to Majestic What's Its Chops, whatever you want to call it. Mountain Majesty, mountain, yeah, that one. Majestic, no. Mountain's Majesty. Purple Mountain, of course, purple, of course it is, Gem, goodness sake. Duh. Purple Mountain's Majesty. So think of a purple mountain and it has a queen or a king. Okay, I'll get there eventually with that one. So let's stick with that. This is going to be quite pale anyway, but as I said, there's not much lay down pigment wise from this particular colour, so we can just go for it and go over it a couple of times and everything will be awesome. There we go, so that one's looking quite nice now as well. So for the more sort of middle ones, let's take the smaller one because that's going to be a bit easier for me, and I'll speed up the big one. More or less straight up and down, so I'll bring that about a third, so that kind of follow the rules of thirds in terms of making a gradient out of it. That's one of the things I will say, the 100 count of the Crayola pencils, there are oodles of purples and pinky purples. I mean, there's lots of them. You're not short on choice. I actually think they could have cut out some of those and given us better reds, because I find that with the Crayolas, it's been a bugbear of mine for a long time, but there isn't really a true red. There's orangey reds and pinky reds, but there's nothing that's like what I would call pillar box red. And obviously I'm just referring to in the UK, our post boxes are traditionally a really sort of, you know, like fire engine red or fire truck red. That would have been nice to have one of those, which we don't have really. The one that I've used in this picture is about the closest thing, which is, it's not great really, it's not great. Okay, so we're just going to start blending this out a little bit now, get rid of some of these little lines because we're looking quite liney there. And then back to Purple Mountain's Majesty. Ah, I got it, that Purple Mountain's Majesty. Yeah, Purple Mountain's Majesty. And we'll just pop this down the bottom like this. So there you can see, I mean, that's quite smooth. It actually looks smoother to the naked eye than it does on the monitor. I'm just having a look there and you can see the indigo seems to be really pronounced, but it's actually not. I just have to take my word for it. Let's see if we can work on this and make it look better on the camera. Yeah. This is the violet purple again. And then Mr. Mountain Majesty. When I'm colouring generally, I do tend to use the pencils that I'm using to blend, and it's usually the lightest colour I'll use to blend it out. I'm really sorry about my wobbly tripod again today. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to tighten a few screws up here. Give me a minute. When I zoom out and look at that, I'm not entirely happy. It looks really flat, especially compared to this one. So I'm going to go back in with this outer space colour. And I'm just going to pop in a little bit round this top edge. I'm really just thickening the outline, so to speak. Just pronouncing that a little bit more. And I'm going to put a little bit down here, but just at the top where it's going to be darkest. Just a little bit. And bring it down very carefully. And this is why it's important to have a really pointy point on your pencil, because you want the accuracy. Yeah, that looks a bit better. I'm a bit happier with that. Alright, so I'm just going to use the same method on the rest of these. So once again, I'm going to speed this part up and we can catch up a little bit later on and we shall look at some foliage. there we go, that's given us quite a nice little glow going on, I would think. I'm quite happy with that so far. It's starting to look quite pretty. What I want to do now is do a bit of foliage, and we are going to have to call it quits after that because I didn't realise we are running out of time. I do try and keep these videos to around an hour. I know some of you would quite happily sit through the whole thing no matter what length it was, and I also know that some of you are quite happy to come back, but the general consensus is that the ideal length for these types of videos is around an hour. So with that in mind, let's crack on. I have jade green and olive. These are the two colours that I'm going to start off with, and it's just really keeping things simple. Once again, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more, move this up out of the way. So starting with these ferny type leaves here at the bottom, I have the jade green, and I'm just going to pop a coat of that down onto these leaves here. I am going to keep the palette for the foliage fairly straightforward because we have so much colour in the middle. I do want the eye to be drawn into the middle of this picture, so the best way to do that is not to have everything else like a dye works explosion. So although these are different types of leaves here, I am going to colour them in also with the same shades. And we're almost going to create a kind of border with the greens because obviously there's quite a lot. If you look up here, there's quite a lot of leaves and things up here too. So we're going to try and do our best to keep that reasonably uniform without being boring, because you know, who likes boring? And again, I just want to get a little bit of sort of shadow in here. Now it doesn't matter where it is really. The light source is coming from in behind these, so technically these should be very, very dark because they're in the foreground. However, artistic license once again and all that. So I'm just darkening in round about this part of the leaf, and I'm just going to blend that out to the jade green and build up a few layers here so that we've got a reasonable amount of pigment down. Again, I'm not pressing hard at any point, at most medium pressure. And I'm just going to put a little bit at the bottom of this one, not a lot, just a little smudge in there at the bottom. And then we can pop that jade green down on top again. I'm going to have to change the light balance here. We're having light balance issues. That's better. It's only taken me a year to figure out how to fix that. Okay, so this one here, I think we'll have a bit of shadow on this side. And as I'm heading towards the middle of the leaf, I am making my hand lighter and lighter, just so we get that sort of slight graduation in the colour. And then we'll pop down the jade green again. Just keep adding more layers. Try and make this a little bit darker in here as well. For this one at the back here, I'm going to make this entire side darker. But within that one colour, which is the darker pencil, I'm going to try and put a bit of pressure on it in at the bottom here to make it even darker still, and I'm pressing quite hard for that. And then just graduating that up. So you're still getting a little bit of variation in the shade, even though you're only using one pencil. And I'm just using the jade green on the other side. And what we can do on this side is we can just put a little line in at the bottom here. Very, very subtle, but when you look at the bigger picture, it usually looks quite good. So, and around here, just the same principle, lighten that up a wee bit. And then in with the jade. Back to my old habit of putting pencils in my mouth. Maybe it's something that I don't do as much now, but I think it might just be linked to using Crayolas, because I used to do it all the time. And it was a habit I tried really hard to get out of for making videos, because obviously nobody can understand what I'm saying if I've got pencils in my mouth. This one here, it's a bit teeny weeny, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'm going to pop a bit of olive down at the bottom here, and then I'm just going to Just going to whack in some green, not too bothered. Tiny detail, tiny detail. All right, for these sort of grass parts and these little sort of sploopy leaves here, I'm going to use the olive on its own, but I'm going to go back to this outer space colour, which is a really sort of dark grey, and it's just to help me get some definition. So a light layer of that on all of these. The way these grasses stick out like this, it kind of reminds me of the top of a pineapple. That's what's making me think of. I like pineapple. Pineapple's nice. Do this. I'm going to do these stalks as well. I'm going to have to sharpen my pencil up because they are the areas are really narrow there, and the point's just getting a little bit blunt. Now interestingly, sharpening that pencil didn't sound nearly as horrendous there as the other ones have done. Yeah, that's better. I can get in there with that. Oh, I'm starting to get hiccups as well. Where did they come from? So I'll just work my way around here. I was talking to a non-artist friend the other day who was asking about my YouTube channel, and I was explaining to them, you know, what I actually do on the channel, and I said I do art and adult colouring videos, and he looked at me and he went, adult colouring videos? And I said, yeah. He said, but he says he knows about the adult colouring movement and he knows it's quite a popular pastime. He said, but I'm failing to grasp why you would need to watch videos on it. So I explained to him about techniques and things and all this sort of stuff, which was absolutely fine. And he said to me, he said, so basically you're just showing people what you do when you colour a page. I'm like, yeah, pretty much. And he just shook his head. So I don't know whether that was, I don't know what that reaction was, but he didn't seem all that, you know, he was quite sort of taken aback by it. Now you can see here I'm making this quite dark, and it's just to get that contrast. But yeah, I said to him, I says, it's funny, I said, sometimes I feel like a bit of a fraud because I sit here and colour away and, you know, I'm always just basically rambling on and do what I do in real life, which is talk too much. So yeah, he was quite surprised that there's people that actually like that. I was like, oh yes, I said there's hundreds of people now, it's not even just one or two, there's hundreds of people that like listen to me talk rubbish. It's quite amusing actually, because especially my family used to say to me when I was really young, you know, when I was a little girl, they used to say that if I could make a living out of talking, I would be a millionaire. And I just find it kind of funny now that one of the things that I love to do, not that it makes me any money, but that doesn't matter, but one of the things that I love to do and that people seem to respond to involves me talking a lot. So I think it's worked out well for everybody, for all parties involved. My mum used to get really annoyed with me when I was a little girl as well, and she used to say to me, Jem, do you never shut up? And I'm like, nope. But I must have learned it from somewhere, so. All I've done with these little leaves here is gone round the outside with the outer space, and then I'm just going back over with a little bit of this olive colour. I don't want to go in too close, but I want you to be able to see what I've done, and it's actually that subtle that you can barely see it on the camera, but I promise you it is there. But this is what we want. We don't want anything sort of, you know, poking out ridiculously and looking like it doesn't belong there. That's kind of defeats the purpose of what I'm trying to do here. The other thing I said to my friend was, it's quite funny because I'm always telling everybody not to worry too much about what they're colouring and just, you know, try and enjoy it, and you know, you don't have to think about it too much. And yeah, so I find that quite funny as well. I'm like, yeah, just do what you want, and he's like, is the whole point that you're giving them a tutorial? And I'm like, yeah, but I just tell them to do what they want anyway. I think I confused the poor boy by the time I'd finished talking to him the other day. It's quite funny. As someone who is a non-colourist though, I didn't expect him to understand, so I just let it slide. Right, do the same with these little grassy fronds, if that's what you want to call them. You can call them whatever you like. I have to say the outer space colour and the olive are going really well together. They seem to blend really well together, and it wouldn't necessarily be an obvious choice. So That just goes to show you it pays sometimes to go out of the ordinary every now and then. I would say, and when I'm doing shadows with other coloured pencils, I tend to use the colour Payne's Grey, which again is a dark grey. It's not as dark as this one, but it's the same sort of idea, so maybe that's kind of stemmed from that. Stemmed, get it? Haha, fnar fnar. Oh yeah, I'm full of it today. Maybe that stemmed from that idea and it's been in my subconscious. Okay, I want to zoom out now and let you see what this looks like. There we go, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. That's actually turning out quite aesthetically pleasing so far. I am relatively happy with the efforts of this so far. If you would like to see me colour the rest of this, let me know in the comments, and I'd love to know what you think about the techniques and the methods that I've used as well, and if you have enjoyed the fact that I'm using Crayola pencils. All of those things would be lovely to read about. You know that I actually really enjoy sitting reading all your comments, and I do take a little bit of time to respond if I've got the time. So we'll just leave it at that for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a very pleasant Sunday, whatever it is you're doing. See you later.